What this presentation is going to be are 10 things that I think will radically change the efficiencies and profitability of any farmers. I'm an urban farmer, so I generally speak more towards that, but these types of things can be applied to any farm, and I think they'll help make them more efficient and more profitable. So this is my farm, Green City Acres, and I've been farming commercially in an urban setting in Kelowna, BC, Canada for 5 years. And I have also been teaching and consulting for 4 years. I've traveled all over the US and in Canada, and I've taught thousands of people now, and I've seen hundreds of different farms and talked to thousands of farmers. And a lot of what I'm going to show you today is based on the things that I've seen, the mistakes that I've made, and things that I've found to make them better, but also things that I've observed from farmers all over the States and in Canada on things that they've done. So you're getting sort of the best tidbits of those things. Before I get into it, I'll just give you a little bit of a background on my farm, kind of blast through some images of what my farm looks like and what it's all about. So my farm is a 1/3 of an acre urban farm on 5 different plots in Kelowna, BC. So I'm in a zone 6B. It's a microclimate because I have a lake effect and I also have a heat island effect in the city. So there's thermal mass in the city that allows me to extend my growing season. It's sort of an inherent advantage of urban agriculture in general. So I have multiple locations. We'll kind of blast through and look at some of those. My farm in an 8-month season can generate $80,000 of revenue on 1/3 of an acre. So that's 15,000 square feet. And part of what makes that possible is focusing in on high value and leveraging my abilities through appropriate technology and streamlining tasks and essentially focusing on tasks that pay. I don't pull weeds on my farm. I rarely do any weeding, and I'll show you how that looks and how I accomplish those things. It's going to be part of our 10 points that we look at. My farm at the height of its success was my last year. I kind of grew my farm for about 4 years straight. I literally doubled my operation for 4 years because this is sort of thing people just tell you, you're doing really well, you should expand. And so you drink the Kool-Aid and you expand until you burn yourself out and you go, this is insane. I can't work any more hours. And that's what happened to me. Is I doubled it every year for 4 years until at its height, it was 2.5 acres of intensive production, did near $250,000 in sales, and had 8 full-time staff. And though the numbers were high, I worked 100 hours a week, and I was micromanaging people, and I learned that year a lot of things that I'm glad I don't do anymore. And these are the things I'm going to share with you today. My farm now, so in my 5th year, I looked at streamlining things. The first thing that made me see that was I dumped all the crops that I grew. I grew 90 different crops that year, annual vegetables. Pretty much most annual veggies that organic CSAs and small farmers grow. Dumped them all into a spreadsheet, and I discovered there was literally 10 crops out of that 90 that made 80% of the income of the farm, and they were grown on a 1/4 acre of land. I was in a partnership. I turned my farm into a cooperative that year, and that had its challenges, and I'm out of that now. So I walked away from the cooperative, and I basically, the next year, grew those crops, and I eliminated everything else. I focused it on the market streams that gave me the most leverage, and I eliminated my CSA. And I know CSA is a popular model, but for what I do on a small, tiny land base, it's just not the most leverage for my ability. I discovered that in my region, it's restaurants and farmers markets. Restaurants primarily, but farmers markets as well. And so I've honed in on the markets that were giving me a lot of return for the least amount of effort. Sort of Pareto's law, something that I've learned to follow religiously, is the rule of 80-20. Focus in on the 20% that yields the 80%, whether it's customers, products, your work, everything. I've applied Pareto's law to everything across the board, and it's changed my operation dramatically. So my farm now operates on 60 hours a week labor total. So that's myself, 40 hours a week or less, with one part-time person who works around 10 to 15 hours a week. And I also have a couple volunteers who live down the street. They're not volunteers, they're just working professionals that live in an apartment complex next to me that come and help us bag veggies for 2 hours on Fridays. And I've got a retired couple that live down the street who manage my tomatoes. And so there's some exchange, some mutual benefit exchange there that prizes all the labor on my farm. What you're going to see is sort of a window into an online course that I've done with my friend Luke Callahan. It's called Profitable Urban Farming. It's going to be a fully immersive urban agriculture experience. I spent 2.5 years filming every single task on my farm, and we essentially wrote a book that's a how-to manual and sort of operations manual, but also filmed every task that we do and put it into this online course. So if you want more information about that, I'll mention it again at the end. So let's just take a little tour of my farm, and then we'll get into my 10 best essentials for profitable urban farming. So like I said, my farm has multiple locations. Right now it has 5. Over the years, I've cycled over 20 plots of land, and I've used the most marginal type of soil, full of invasive grass and invasive weeds. And I've learned that the book is never finally written on soil. Soil can be brought back to fertility. If we have time for questions at the end, we can talk a little bit about that. This is an overview of my plots. This is one that's 2 blocks from my house. This one's about 15 blocks from my house. This is my house, so I am now a mortgage owner. I rented and farmed on this property for 3 years before the landowners offered to sell it to me. So I took on a mortgage, sold my soul to the bank, and now this is my main base of operations. I have 2 50-foot high tunnels in the backyard. This is the processing area, walk-in coolers in my carport, little truck, storage in the back, home office on the back. I live and work there. So I essentially am a homesteader in the sense that I don't really have to travel that far to go to work. All of my plots are within a pretty close area. This is another urban plot that's about 5 blocks away and another plot that's about 2 blocks away. So most of my land is in a concentrated area. This is an image of my backyard, my work area, where I do vegetable processing and washing and things like this. This is a shot of these greenhouses in the springtime, and I'm all about stacking functions, as just like a lot of permaculture people are, as I literally stack. So it's cool in the northern hemisphere when you have the sun lower in the sky. I can hang things from my greenhouse ridge poles and grow microgreens there that will generate near $1,000 a week in revenue while having field crops on the ground. And then the summer, then I'll double those up and use them for tomatoes. And I do all my tomatoes using hard pruning methods, plants planted 10 inches apart. We harvested 2,000 pounds of cherry tomatoes between 3 small greenhouses like this on my farm. I use a lot of modular season extension infrastructure just simply because I have to. I can't put a greenhouse in everybody's backyard and front yard, so I use quick hoops. I sort of modified this design that comes from Johnny's Selected Seeds. So I can have my entire farm, 1/3 of an acre, under poly at any time of the season. Usually it's at the very beginning and at the very end with this stuff. Just some more shots of backyard plots. I categorize my land into 2 areas, high rotation and bi-rotation. High rotation is a term that I created, means that each bed is turned over multiple times of the season. On average, a 25-foot bed in a high rotation area can generate $800 of revenue in a season. That's if it has at least 3 crops in it. Most of them are between 4 and 6 crops. Quick-growing crops like greens, baby root vegetables, field-based microgreens, fast-growing, anything under 60 days or less. I don't grow any crops that are 85 days or longer. So even the tomatoes I grow they're all indeterminate varieties, meaning that they continuously fruit. They're all hard pruned, and I target the longest amount of picking season out as I can, and that's what I do with all the vegetables that I grow. This is a rare thing. I rarely spend time weeding, but if I do, it is stirrup hoeing walkways, and it's done in minutes. I spend a total, with the entire labor of the farm, less than 8 hours a year pulling weeds. If it's weeding, it's proactive weeding, which I'll show you later, and just brief stirrup hoe weeding. In a city, you have less weeds. You're not next to these open fields that just blow in weeds from all over the place. There's just less weeds, so there's less to manage. When I started the business, it was entirely by bicycle. So for the first 3 years, we did everything with bikes and custom-built steel frame trailers. All of our restaurant deliveries, this is going to farmers market on a Saturday morning, bringing about $1,500 of product with us to a market. We're a small farm, right? We don't do big numbers at farmers markets, but we do big numbers with chefs. I will sometimes deliver $1,000 of product to one restaurant, and that takes me 15 minutes. You know, standing at a farmer's market, I'm there for 8 hours, and I have to pre-package everything, where restaurants, I can just drop it off. So that's really how I was able to start leveraging our profits on the farm. So I don't do everything by bike anymore. I'll look at that again later. This is our farmer's market stand. I love doing farmer's markets. It's like Farmer Appreciation Day every day at a farmer's market. It's like, you know, you've been working hard all week, you go there, everybody loves what you do, all you hear is good things. I mean, I often pinch myself being like, and is this still real? Like, people just tell me how awesome we are all day. So that's what I love about doing farmer's markets. It's a beautiful aspect of a lifestyle that even though farmer's markets are like 15% of my revenue, I still never want to stop doing them because they're so damn fun. And the people you meet there are your community, and you build that community. And this is one thing that a lot of people often think, is that everything's just about The profits are measured by finance, but they're not. Profits are measured by social equity that you build, your resource capital, your knowledge, your relationships with people, building your family. There's so many things. So I'm going to show you that this is about, this farm makes a lot of money for its size, but it's far above and beyond that. This isn't just about making money. This is about crafting a quality lifestyle that's fun and is meaningful. So the chefs have become my biggest part of running the farm, and that wasn't necessarily what I planned to do. It just kind of happened by default. By selling at the farmer's market, I had chefs that would come by and were interested in what I was doing. They would also literally walk by the front yards of plots that I was farming in. And this is another aspect of urban agriculture that's so unique and allows you to build connections and a network so quickly, because if you have multiple garden plots all over the city, you have multiple neighbors. And I'm in those front yards more than the homeowners are. So everybody on these streets gets to know me, and they get to learn about gardening. They walk by and they ask questions and they get engaged. And the 20 plots of land that I've cycled over the last 5 years, at least 10 gardeners have popped up that have learned these techniques and have applied them on their own scale. So this is building food resilience on a scale that it's hard to measure, because its ripple effect can be so huge once it really magnifies, and then each of those gardeners inspires somebody else. So I think urban farmers are really at the forefront of bringing the message of food security, food sovereignty, all these issues, whatever they are. For me, it's just about having fun and having a good quality of life and making a good living doing it. But it also has all these social stacked effects on it as well. Not to mention greening spaces that were just derelict before. But for me, it's the quality of life thing. So these are my top 10 essentials for success with profitable urban farming. It could be profitable farming too. I think anybody that's in agriculture in some way or another could take some of these ideas. Number one, and I was guilty of this more than most people, is follow your ideology, but keep it in your back pocket. And what I mean by that is we all come in with big ideas. I wanted to do everything by bike and trailer, and I did for 3 years, and I killed myself doing it. This is an image of me moving 7 bales of hay from, I used to straw mulch everything, actually, believe it or not. And I used to go and ride my bike a half an hour up the highway to get straw from this one guy's farm. And it's pretty funny, the reactions you get. You know, I'm blasting through rush hour traffic. Everybody's in SUVs and single occupancy vehicles. And there comes this peasant with, piles of straw, sweating. And they're like, they can't believe it. Like, people are like, you'd think it was like a naked person walking down the street because the reactions that they get. But people are so blown away. I still get people saying, man, I saw you riding your bike. And the cool thing about this, it was just basically a wicked marketing piece. Like, that was the after effect. The intention was, I want to live by my values, screw the system, this and this and this. I'm going to do it all by bike. And I still do most of it by bike. I'm pulling my 400-pound BCS rototiller. I have a daisy-trained trailer. I can do most things by bike still. When it comes to delivering to the restaurants, I have made a small compromise. I have a tiny truck that I use. So again, I still have my ideology. I still have the core fundamental values and beliefs that I had when I wanted to get into this. I still have them, but I've learned that you have to compromise a little bit, because if you can't take care of yourself at the end of the day, if your mission is to save the world, and that's a good mission, but at the end of the day, if you can't take care of yourself and you're burning out and you're getting so physically exhausted that you can't even do the work, well, then you're not helping anybody. So you got to make some small compromises and have successes. Instead of being A to Z, go A to B. And that's what this farming is all about. This is A to B. I'm not going to stand here and say this is the most ultimate form of sustainable agriculture. It's not. But it's a step in the right direction for many reasons. And that's what's important. And let's take small steps and have successes and then build on from there. I would love to have a 100-acre food forest. I really would. But it's just not within my means right now. And I would way rather save to work towards something like that by doing something I love than going and being a rig pig in northern Alberta and working on the tar sands. So this is, for me, it's baby steps. And by doing this, it's allowed me to buy a house, and now I have my own place. That was never an option for me. My parents don't have any money. They would have never co-signed a mortgage. I did this through farming and living by my values, but by making small compromises. Thank you. I double dug every bed on my farm for the first year. Okay, so I read John Jevons' book, Biointensive. I double dead every damn bed on my farm, and it fucking killed me. Okay? This took 2 days to do this. So, okay, yeah, it's better for the soil a little bit, but making a small compromise can have a huge effect. And I'm not saying you have to rototill everything. I only rushy rototill in the spring. I do no-till strategies for all mid-season planting, the summer till the fall. But with a rototiller, I can do 50 beds in a day, right? One person. So food prices are still what they are. They're still relatively cheap. You know, if I could sell salad mix at $50 a pound, yeah, I'd probably double dig. But it's just not practical. So this is the compromise that these are some of the compromises I've had to make, and this is really important, is to keep your ideology in your back pocket, but don't lose it. Keep it there, but just like bring it back in steps. Number 2, be an early adopter. The beautiful thing about agriculture right now is the fact that farmers are so damn scarce. There has never in history been less farmers on the planet. In North America, less than 2% of people know how to farm, right? So once you can get past the idea that you don't need to own land to farm, because the reality is, land is abundant. It may be concentrated in the hands of few people. So what? They don't have the skills to do the farming. As a farmer, you have massive amounts of value. If you have the skills, you'll always have a place to farm. So let that liberate you and be an early adopter. There has never been a better time, in my opinion, to get into agriculture than now. Because there's so few people doing it, and it's becoming hip. It's becoming cool. The early adopters, just like the tech guys in the 90s, will establish themselves and do very well in the future, because the reality is the average age of a farmer in North America is 60 years old, and there's more people leaving agriculture than there are replacing those jobs. So any economist will tell you, forget peak oil, forget climate change, forget all that stuff. Just look at the numbers. There's too many farmers leaving and too few farmers coming in. So at some point, we can't have, like, the price will go so high for food that you can't have food at any price. So now is the time to get in, get established, start small, get some production going, and just start farming. Because just forget owning land. You don't have to own land. Get in there, be an early adopter. Urban agriculture also has a massive marketing advantage. Probably one of the biggest things, the most important aspects of urban farming is the fact that you are in the market. I don't have to try hard to sell my stuff. People walk by the plots and they go, hey, this is a great idea. And the thing is with it is that the farms speak the language of the day. My farms look like agriculture, right? I'm just going to go back to a picture here of one of my plots. That looks like agriculture. I've read all the permaculture books, the main ones. That's what got me into all of this. And I tried many permaculture techniques. The challenge I always had with permaculture as far as its application to the land is that it took me a day to explain it to somebody. People walk by this and they go, that's production. Production needs no introduction. It's simple. It's understandable. And will agriculture look like this in 100 years? I have no idea. But it's how it looks now, and people get it. So that engages people. That gets the discussion going. That brings people to your cause. So be an early adopter. Number 3 is start small and keep your overhead low. This is another huge advantage to urban agriculture. You don't have to buy land. You don't have to have heavy infrastructure. I started my farm on $7,000, and I turned it into $22,000 that first year without any experience, never had a garden in my life, watched a bunch of YouTube videos, read a few books, applied some techniques that I learned through spin farming, and I've adapted those techniques and made them better. But I started, and I just got some production going. I didn't have all the best infrastructure when I started. I didn't have all the know-how. But let that liberate you. People often think, oh, well, I just need more education. And then they get stuck in this university cycle of, you get a bachelor's, okay, now I need a master's, okay, I might as well go back for my PhD. Forget that. Just start. Plant some shit and let it grow and just start selling it. Like, it's really that simple. So start small, keep your overhead low. You could literally start in your grandmother's front yard and just start planting some stuff, and that will, every time you put one foot in front of the other, more opportunities present themselves. So just by getting that production going, you're educating yourself, you're building social equity in the community, and you're garnering interest. People say, hey, this is cool. Do you want to do my yard? Yes. Okay. Then you start building. That's exactly what I did. It's the best way to find land, is to just start somewhere. So keep your overhead low. There's this sort of cliche with our society that the more success you achieve, everybody says, expand, expand, expand. And I did that. Like I said at the beginning, I expanded to 2.5 acres in the first 4 years. I doubled my operation every year for 4 years, doubled its gross profits and its size for 4 years. And I burnt out quick because our overhead was too high. We had too much labor. Labor is the biggest expense or biggest cost. And we had we had a 2,000 square foot work area that we rented. We had too many costs. And so all of a sudden, operation became not as viable. So when I scaled down to 1/3 of an acre, slimmed it all down, focused on those 10 crops that made money, I was all of a sudden working less than half the time, and I was making more than double my net profit that last year. So keep your overhead low. In order to expand, you have to take on more overhead, but there's sort of a sweet spot where you can grow to the demand. As you start having more success with the farm and people are demanding more stuff, grow to almost meet that demand. Never quite saturate it, because I did that. I actually saturated my markets and all of a sudden couldn't sell everything. So you want to grow slowly, but keep your overhead low. This is critically important, and if somebody would have told me this 10 years ago, I probably would have changed. I could have done so many different things. Is source high-grade information. Universities are not high-grade information. I'm sorry to say that. I'm sorry if that offends some people, but they're not. High-grade information are people like you here who are in the field doing stuff. So instead of wasting $20,000 on a degree in urban agriculture at a university, budget $5,000 and go to a few farmers and pay them for their time. Pay them $100 an hour, $200 an hour, whatever it is. Pay them for their time, because in 10 minutes or an hour, talking with somebody like me or some people like you here, you will save hundreds of hours of wasted time and thousands of dollars of wasted money. And I have piles of crap that I'll never use again, because if I would have just paid to talk to some farmers that would have said, hey, don't do your irrigation this way, or don't plant that way, I could have saved so much money and time. So it's really sourcing high-grade information. And I mean, you guys are doing that by coming to things like this, because you're learning from the doers. There's that saying, those that don't do teach, right? I guess I'm a kind of a hypocrite in a way. I'm teaching, but exactly. Go to the people that are doing it and learn from them. Find mentors. There's a guy in LA named Ty Lopez who has this great saying. He was a mentee of Joel Salatin's. And he says, you always want to have 3 types of people in your life. A third that are where you want to be in 10 years. A third of people that were where you at. They're your peers. They're people you connect with and work together with. And then the bottom third are people that are a little bit behind you that you can help. And I started applying this in my life, and things like masterminding, getting together with a group of people that have similar mission as you, and just have an accountability group and work for each other and just help each other and be accountable to each other's success. Find these mentors and find people to work with. Can accelerate your learning curve like crazy. So source that high-grade information, and it's not hard to find, and you can usually find it locally. I learned a ton from farmers in my area, and not even just organic farmers, conventional farmers too. Conventional farmers aren't a bunch of evil people. They're good farmers, good people just doing what they think is best. I learned a ton from conventional farmers, especially when it comes to production, and even just understanding the bioregion. So don't discriminate against people just based on a few things that don't rub with your ideology. Seek those mentors, because a lot of these farmers want to share that information. They want to see a new generation of farmers come in and take over for them, because these guys are burnt out. So source high-grade information. This one changed my life. Focus on the tasks that pay. So this means focusing in on things that you can measure by your efforts. So things like harvesting, planting, and marketing. I can measure those things. If I go and stand in a farmer's market for 8 hours, I can measure how much I sold and how much I was making per hour. If I go and harvest 400 pounds of spinach, I can measure that. Things like weeding, thinning crops, and screwing around with irrigation, you can't measure those things. So it's hard to decide if it's working. So one thing I've learned that's huge with this is give up on perfection. Forget perfection. Target 85%. 85% is good enough. Most people can't tell the difference between 85% and 100, because there's sort of a curve that happens that I've discovered. It's kind of like when you stick a glass of water on the tap and you turn the tap on, it fills up really quickly and then it goes back down. In order to fill up the last inch, you got to slow the tap down. So it's like 85% can happen pretty quickly, but to get to that next 15% to get to 100 takes almost the same amount of effort to get to 85. So focus in on that and just streamline things. You don't need to have perfection. Perfection will kill you. It did for me. So just looking at these tasks, harvesting, planting, and marketing, that's literally what I do most of the time on my farm. Very little else. Because of some things that I do that can leverage the other things that I don't have to do. So I don't have to weed because I avoid it altogether. Be proactive. Using tarps with stale seed bedding technique. Using landscape fabric around perimeters. I use landscape fabric because it's more practical. One person can spread landscape fabric around a 1/4 acre. If I did it with straw mulch or wood chips, it would take days. So landscape fabric, it's practical, it's fast. Flame weeding, massive amount of leverage here. Stale seed bedding technique combined with a flame weeder means you don't pull weeds in beds, ever. And if you don't have to till them, so you can use a no-till technique with flame weeding and you rarely have to pull weeds. That's time you save, that's more time you can spend with your family or more time you can spend at the beach. Streamline your processing tasks. So using some basic do-it-yourself infrastructure, washing tables, consolidate your work areas, streamline things, have flows of work. I dry my greens with a table that I built that gets the water off it. The sunflower hulls fall through it. I use a modified washing machine to spin my greens dry, and then they go onto a drying table. So just an example of just some, simple. This thing costs $50 to build. The beautiful thing of this is that it allows me to sell the product for longer. So I get a longer marketing period, and it looks nicer. It displays better in the bag. If you have wet greens going into a bag, at least at my farmer's market where it's like 110 degrees in the summer, I can't sell that stuff. It'll just rot by midday, so I have to dry things. So this streamlines it, but also makes the product better itself. Use accurate crop densities and spend time to find out exactly what they are. There's certain resources you can use, like you could buy J.M. Fortier's book, and he's got tables in there that say, use these densities, but they're going to be a little bit different for everybody's bioregion. So you got to modify that a little bit. But the more accurate they are, then you don't have to spend time thinning radishes or thinning carrots. That's time that doesn't pay. That just means you're working for nothing. You want to get paid for every single thing you do. On a small farm, like mine, 1/3 of an acre, it's absolutely critical. Optimize your harvest times. So what I do with this, I take multiple days to harvest. The main reason for that is so that I can harvest things at the right time. If I can avoid harvesting greens in the rain so I don't have to wash them, great. If I harvest them on Tuesday, that's fine. If they're dry, they'll keep the week, no problem. I would rather do that than have to wash. If I have to wash greens, it adds 4 hours to my processing time at each week. So if I can choose different days of the week to do it based on the weather, every Sunday I look at the weather, the forecast for the week. Oh shit, it's going to be rainy on Thursday. Okay, I might as well harvest greens this Wednesday so I don't have to process them. So that saves me a ton of time. Same thing with microgreens. Harvest when they're ready, they're ready. You got to harvest them. Having some flexibility to do this will leverage your abilities. Use appropriate technology. Seeders, the Jang seeder, Johnny's Quick Greens harvester, BCS rototillers, inside nurseries. This is my kitchen. This is what I'm doing right now. I have stuff growing in my kitchen right now that will go into greenhouses in a couple weeks. Use appropriate technology to leverage your abilities. This is absolutely critical. You can't manage what you don't measure. If you don't measure it, you don't know where you're at. So I measure every single thing on my farm. I can tell you what every bed on my farm grew ever since I started. How much it yielded, how much seed I used, how long it took for the seeds to emerge, how long they took to mature. Everything. I record everything. And it's a lot of labor at first to set up the systems, but once they're in place, it makes planning your farm, planning your week, delegating tasks. So I'll take questions at the end. So much easier. So this is a base sheet. This is what I call a crop profile sheet. So all the information I record from all of my harvests over the years goes into this sheet, and I update it constantly. After 5 years, it's pretty static at this point, but this has everything. When do I plant that crop? What seed roller plate do I use? How much seed do I use? What's the average profit per bed? Everything. This allows me to plan my farm really easily. Crop planning, I don't do crop planning the way most farmers do. Most farmers that run CSAs will plan what's in their box each week. I do it a bit differently because I improvise a lot on my farm because I want to maximize the output. If something's not selling, I turn it under and plant something else. Constantly adapting to the market. And that's what you have to do as an urban small farmer, because If I have some production happening that's not selling, then it's just I'm wasting my efforts. I'm not getting paid for that stuff. So spreadsheets allow me to record all this information. Planting dates. Everything that gets planted gets recorded. Yields. Everything that comes off the field gets recorded. How I structure my orders. These are orders that are incoming. I can sort them that connects to a harvest tally sheet that I take out in the field each week. These are previous week sales. I also use accounting software for some of this as well. But believe it or not, this is my most used tool on my farm. I use this more than a stirrup hoe, a pitchfork, a shovel, my rototiller, everything. This is my most used tool on my farm. Every time I'm at a plot, I'm recording voice memos. So all of my spreadsheets connect to beds on my farm. And because I'm multi-locational, I can't just look outside each day and say, oh yeah, we're going to harvest that and this and this. It's all in different places. So I need to use technology to manage that. So every time I'm at a plot, I'm recording information. Okay, these 2 beds are going to be ready for next week. Okay, that just emerged. I spend a half an hour twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. I go on the computer for half an hour, just plug my voice memos into the spreadsheets. I record that data and compile it. And it gets better and better every year. And that allows me to really, really leverage my abilities and understand what's coming off my farm. This is totally important. And another thing that's almost based on ideology, and it was for me at least, is that I wanted to grow a lot of things because whatever reasons. I wanted to have a very diversified farm. My farm is still somewhat diversified. I grow about 20 different types of crops. But focusing in on the high yield markets and crops is what really allowed me to have a more enjoyable quality of life and make more money. So as far as crops are concerned, I've created a system that I call a CVR, a crop value rating. And this is mostly for urban farms, but you could apply this to any types of crops. If you were to broaden this for larger scale land, you might add a few more categories. But basically on my land base, if I'm going to grow any crop, it has to have one of these 3 things. So the first is it has to have a short date to maturity, 85 days or less. I don't grow anything that's more than 85 days, and that's including tomatoes. Has to have a high yield per square foot. So cabbage is a low yield per square foot. The crop takes up this much space. You sell a head like this big, so it's a low yield per square foot. Salad greens, I can cut 3 times, and in a square foot, can make $20. Price per pound. So cabbage, again, is a low price per pound. Potatoes are a low price per pound. Focus on higher stuff per pound. This is just what's realistic for urban farmers. It doesn't make sense for us to grow potatoes and winter squash in the city. Those things can be grown by other farmers that have the land, and we can find ways to work with them and even help sell their products for them in the city. We can work together, cooperate. Season is very important. How long is the season? For example, for tomatoes, some beefsteak big heirloom tomatoes have a very short season. They're determinate. They settle their fruit at once, so they take 110 days to mature, and then they're picked all at once. So for tomatoes, I target cherries and saladettes that have a long season of picking that I can pick for at least 2.5 or 3 months. Radishes, I can plant every single week from April until the first week of October, same as most of my greens. So the idea is I want to get the longest season out of all the crops I grow. And number 5, which is the most important, is popularity. Because you could grow things like microgreens and specialty herbs and baby root veggies until you're blue in the face, but if nobody buys them, it doesn't matter what you charge. So I find the larger the land, the less of these categories you can have, but the smaller the land, the more you need. So for myself on 1/3 of an acre, I have a few 3s that have 3 of these things. Most of them are 4s and 5s. If I go down to a 1/4 acre, I would eliminate all the 3s and I would just go 4s and 5s. I focus in on the crops that will have more value. High value market streams. Again, I had a hang up I was a class warrior when I grew up. My mother was a socialist hammering into my head that rich people are evil and, they're bad. And so I didn't want to sell to high-end restaurants because I had this moral dilemma about it. But it's BS. It's absolute BS. That was a fear in my mind, learning things that have actually liberated me. And that's the can of worms I won't get into now. But these chefs are awesome people. They want to support farmers. They want to use seasonal. They want to feed people the best stuff they can, and they'll pay you a kick-ass price. So why wouldn't you sell to them? If they want your stuff, sell it to them. It's sort of going the path of least resistance. That's what I discovered, is be like water. You're not water doesn't just go and push through things. It goes around. And so if somebody wants something, sell it to them if they're willing to pay the price. So focusing on the high value. I numbered these because where I am, I find the highest value market stream for me, and this could be different for everybody. For Jean Martin's farm, it's probably a little bit different because he's farming in a slightly different context. But for me, restaurants are the highest value, leveraging my ability, least amount of effort for highest payoff. Farmers markets are the second. The only difference between farmers markets and the restaurants is that I have to individually pack things, so that takes more time, and I have to stand there. But it also has a lot of social equity that's built into that too, so there's other values that are extracted in that way. CSAs are my third lowest value or third high value market stream. I have eliminated that at a third of an acre now. And the fourth one is selling to distributors. And I actually still do sell distributors because I only sell certain products to them. But these are the market streams that I find are the most high value in that particular order. Number 8 is organize your crops and land by zones. So this is in a way a permaculture aspect, but it's not anything new, actually. There was this geezer back in the 1800s came up with this idea of the isolated state. This guy, Johann von Thunen. He came up with this idea that you could design cities based around crop production. This is 1826, and he said, the center of the city is where market gardening happens. Quick-growing vegetables that can feed people fast, that can grow on a small land base, because real estate values are higher in a city, and a variety of other reasons. Grains, fruit, other types of crops that don't have perishability, they make sense to transport. So those things can be grown further outside. So I use a system that I call a land hierarchy. I also have a crop hierarchy, but I'll just explain this now. Essentially, I have 2 categories of land, high rotation and birotation. The folks from spin farming that I actually learned a lot of my stuff from that I've changed, they have 3. So they have just like in permaculture, a zone 1, 2, and 3. 3 being the least intensive. So in its application to urban farming, it means how many crops can I get planted in this bed in a season? So nowhere on my farm will there ever be 1 crop in a bed per season. Nowhere. At minimum 2. So high rotation means each bed here will be planted between 3 and 6 times per season, and on average generate $800 of revenue per bed in the Canadian growing climate, so 7.5-month season. So that means that these are fast-growing crops. I call them quick crops. Anything that's 60 days or less, so I can rotate these crops over and over again. I have to amend the soil between it, but they're constantly in production. And so all of these plots, high rotation, are in this inner zone. This is my city. This is where I live. The orange dot is my house. These 2 plots here are my closest high rotation plots. 80% of my production is in a 5-block radius. So all of this land, these get planted over and over again. I'm at these plots all the time, multiple times throughout the week. Birotation plots are longer season crops that require less work and will yield a little bit less as far as revenue. So typically there's 2 crops in it. There's a primary crop and a secondary crop. So in this case, a primary crop is the main crop that's going to be in there for the longest period of time. So here it's paddy pan squash. I put paddy pan squash in the ground about mid-May, but that means a month and a half before that, I have a window of time where I can actually get another crop in the ground before this one goes. So that would be a quick growing crop. So before I put paddy pans in here, I can have radishes and arugula in there in the spring. So that stuff's out of the ground, and then these go in. And that's what spends the majority of the season. So that's a birotation area. So my birotation areas are in the second zone. This third zone is there just to represent where, when I started farming, I had plots all around here. I had plots further around. But what's really cool is that over the years, the more social equity I've built in my city, the more it consolidates. And so my plots keep concentrating down in smaller areas because I get to know people. I have neighbors everywhere. I lost this plot this season. I just gained another one right here. So now I have 4 plots in that inner zone. So now this year it's like 90% of my production is within a 5-block radius of my house. So it's pretty cool. I can get on my bike and just fly over there. You know, I can work in flip-flops all day, basically. It's a great quality of life, but it's all in this inner zone. And so it's really important to specialize your land based on the type of production. And so that means you're going to have 500 square feet of lettuce, 400 square feet of radishes. They're not monocultures. They're just smaller, they're just concentrated areas for logistics. If you pull the lens back a little bit, you see that it's not a monoculture. It exists within a neighborhood where there's trees and bees and other people's gardens. There's tons of biodiversity. Some people get hung up on, oh man, that's a monoculture. It's not a monoculture. It's just practical. Because if I have to go and spend the same amount of time on each plot every time of the day, that means I'm going to be spreading around my time. It's not efficient. It's better that I can go to one plot and get a ton of stuff and then another plot and the same thing, opposed to having to go to each of them all the time. So my buy rotation plots I only go to once a week. Everything else, the high rotation stuff, I'm there all the time. Because I'm multi-locational, I don't want to be tracked around the city all the time. Number 9 is diversify your products and your market streams. So if you have less products, you need more market streams. If you have more products, you can have less market streams. So one example of this, I have a friend in Vancouver who runs a badass microgreens operation called Vancouver Food Peddlers. I encourage you to check them out. You go on my YouTube channel, theurbanfarmer.co, and you can see a video that I did with him. He's got a shipping container that he's turned into a microgreens operation. They do $8,000 a week in sales, and they only have 4 crops: pea shoots, radish shoots, sun shoots, and buckwheat. Oh, 5, and they do wheatgrass. So they only have 5 crops, but they've really diversified their market streams. They sell their products to other farmers' CSAs. They sell to a huge variety of restaurants, juice bars. They sell at farmers markets twice a week. They do home deliveries. They're diversified because they have less products. So if you're a farmer, like J.M. Fortier is a great example on the other side, is he's got a diversified crop profile, and so he doesn't have to have as much diversity in his market streams because he's got a CSA with more than 100 members. So his diversity there is in his crops because he can offer value to each individual customer. Whereas if you have only 5 crops, you're not a one-stop shop for anybody. So you have to diversify your market streams. That's really important. Something that I've learned, I've done in different aspects, because we have run a 100-member CSA where we had less market streams. And now, myself as a small farmer, I've got a bunch of different restaurants and a farmer's market that I sell to. So I have lots of different customers that I'm selling to. Number 10, this is so important, is you need to develop systems that can be easily replicated and taught. And this is why you want to track everything that you do. So when I started, I was tracking all my tasks. I had a clipboard that I'd take with me at my plots, and I would time how long it took to do each thing. And I'd make notes on that, because if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. I really refined all the tasks on the farm. And in that way, when somebody comes to work for me, I know how long that task can take, and I have a system on how to do it. Because if, you get woofers that come to the farm or something. I don't take woofers anymore, but I used to. And it's like, okay, do this or do that. You just end up wasting time as the business owner. So the more systems you have in place that you can replicate and teach people, the faster you can get somebody into production and doing stuff. So I find a good number with 85% again. If you know how long it takes you to do something, well, nobody's going to do it as good as you, right? Like that's like I call it a small businessman syndrome. My dad sort of hammered that into my head since I was a kid, because my dad was a small entrepreneur, and he's like, nobody's going to do it as good as you. So you always got to do it yourself. And so that's what I did for 4 years, basically, until I took on a bunch of employees. But I did everything myself, and it killed me. So I find 85%, if you can find somebody that can do it 85% as good as you, that's good. That's good enough. Pay them well. Treat them well. Because nobody has the same incentive as you as a business owner. So understand that and use systems to help get them doing it as best as they can as possible. One thing I find with working with people is give them a lot to live up to through positive reinforcement. Like, you're good at this. This is going to be so easy for you. And just build people up so they have a lot to live up to, instead of thinking that you're just going to be let down by them. So people will want to live up to your standards because you have this really high impression of them. That's something that's really helped me over the years. So I'll just explain. We got some time for questions, which is good, but I'll just explain this urban farming course. Luke and I we spent a year doing this. I've been filming the content for 2.5 years. There's nothing like it out there. It's essentially an A to Z on how to do every single thing on an urban farm. So starting at point A, I don't have land, I don't know anything about farming, I don't have any money, I've never done this in my life, to, in 2 years, have you making $50,000 on a 1/4 acre of land and understanding the system. So that's what I want to do. I want to have 50 million new farmers across the US and Canada. That's what I want to see. And with this type of model, we're showing you that you don't need a lot of money, you don't need any experience, all you got to have is a will to do it and like the lifestyle. That's all you need. And be willing to work your ass off, especially when you're starting. But what I've done with this is I'm taking out all the guesswork for you. Like, you don't have to figure out how to wash vegetables. You don't have to figure out how to harvest greens. You don't have to figure out how to plant stuff, turn beds over, do no-till. You don't have to figure any of that out. It's all in this. So this is essentially a book that goes through every aspect of starting your farm from nothing to make it into a highly profitable endeavor for yourself. With every task, I've filmed everything on it. So you click on a section, You'll read a bit about it. There'll be some pictures, then there'll be a video that shows you how to do it. And it marks everything you've done. So as you read through it, it just keeps up to date. And so once you buy into this, you have access to it forever. We're going to constantly make this better. We're going to develop it over time. Right now, everything is in there to get you started. We wanted to get it out earlier, but it's been a massive project, so it's been a long time in the making. If you're curious about some of the stuff that I use, like my spreadsheets, my infrastructure, when I do workshops, I usually bring this little USB drive with me, but I couldn't get any to come down here because Chinese New Year's, so they wouldn't ship any. So I have basically a Dropbox package. If anybody wants that, it's a lot of information that's in the course. So if you buy it, I'll give you $50 off the course. So if you want some of this stuff now, just come and talk to me, and I'll send you a link, and we'll give you $50 off the course. So that's it for the Profitable Urban Farming course. Just go to Profitable Urban Farming, sign up to the mailing list, and you'll get notified when it comes out. This is all of my contact information. I'll just leave this up here, and we'll take some questions. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Jean Martin's going to be up next, so stick around for his.
Thank you for listening to this audio presentation recorded live at PV2 in March of 2015. To learn more about Permaculture Voices and for a lot more audio content, visit permaculturevoices.com.